What's up, guys? It's Ian here. It is day 6 of our Colorado trip, and so this trip we are actually going to be picking up in Salida, and we run what Onyx calls Aspen Ridge, and it made for quite the trail. It was a great way to kind of just cap off the trip. We had spent the night on I'm gonna say Kibler Pass and come down into Crested Butte, and then drove our way over to Salida. And it was just me and Matt at this point. We kind of were losing a few people along the way as the trip carried on, but the trail was awesome, and I'll speak more about some of the stuff as we get into the video. Something of note would be that, as Onyx calls it, Aspen Ridge, if you have some of the other maps, they're actually going to call it maybe a Deadhorse Gulch, and it has very little traffic on it. Now, when we were on this trail, we actually got off trail and ended up on a little side street road that proved to be a lot of fun to do. And then I will say, just from a use perspective, it is two-way traffic. However, it's very, very narrow with very few places to pass. We did run into a few side-by-sides along the way. We ran into a gentleman on a motorcycle, and thankfully, every time we caught traffic, it was in somewhere that we could get around. But ultimately, it is a narrow trail. It's a little bit off camber, and it is something that you should just be mindful of when you're deciding to hit this trail. Something of note, when we did this trail, we ran it from what would be considered south to north. So we left Salida and then went north on the trail, and then ended up driving back into Colorado Springs this day. And there's a lot of just rocky climbs, nothing super crazy. There is one section that I actually struggled with for a bit, and that's coming up. All right, guys, so what you just saw was Matt getting up probably the most technical section of the trail, and he made it look pretty easy. Now, he is also in a Tacoma with a rear locker, and I know that I am driving around in a heavily modified Ridgeline, but nevertheless, it is a stock all-wheel drive Ridgeline from that perspective. So It actually took several attempts at the bottom to get situated and get the right line that made sense. And then went for the climb, and it turned out really, really well. So I would say if you guys are running this trail, this is going to be your bottleneck. If you're in an all-wheel drive, I would definitely suggest maybe running it in the opposite direction, or being very particular with the line choice you make to get up that hill. But either way, that is probably the hardest part of this trail. As I mentioned earlier, this is going to be something you'll have to contend with on this trail. It's just oncoming traffic. As you can see here, we've seen a motorcycle side by side, and we actually, just after we got off the shelf road section, or not, I wouldn't say shelf road, that's the wrong term, but just the very tight sections of the trail, we actually came into a group of about 6 side by sides that were heading our way. So that would have been really tough to deal with had we met in the middle of the trail. So at this point, we have kind of completed the southernmost portion of the Aspen Ridge Trail, and so now it's more of a Forest Service road for the most part here on out. Still has a lot of amazing views. It's got some stream crossings, and just really enjoying this mountain plateau area that is this part of Colorado. It's kind of neat to see, and I've said it in other videos, just how dramatically it changes depending on what part of the state you're in. And that's probably one of the fun things about going here and adventuring. So we're almost done with the trail, and we came across this awesome playground area, and so basically locked it up, slid to the stop, and then turned in here and just drove around. And I think these kinds of areas are just an absolute blast. It's good for unloading. You know, obviously if you're going to unload like your side-by-side or something, this would be a great place to park. But it's just fun to try out stuff, drive around. There's a few climbs and some rutted sections. There's some sandy bits even in here too. So just things to be mindful of. If you're going to go out on the trail and you see an area like this, don't be afraid to stop and drive around. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us on this trip. It is super cool. Looking forward to where we're going to go later this year. Planning a trip to Utah and driving around there, just getting to see what Utah has to offer. Everybody's been telling me that if I'm going to drive all the way to Colorado, I should drive a little bit farther and go to Utah. So be on the lookout for that in the coming months. And I hope you guys like this installment. We're going to keep playing with what we think makes sense for the style of the videos and just keep moving from there. But thanks so much for watching. See you guys.